So this barn quilt process, every community is going to go down a different road and have a different process. The important thing is to put the word out and to be inclusive, because you just don't know who's going to come forward. In the projects that we've been involved with in the Longwoods area of southwestern Ontario, it all started with a history story that we wanted to tell. We researched and learned about that history. In the case of Wardsville, it was the founders of Wardsville, which was a War of 1812 story. Then we designed or found the quilt blocks to illustrate that story, because there's a whole tradition of quilt blocks and a database with thousands of quilt blocks with a name for each one.
Yes, so we used programs called Block Base and EQ7. And on those computer programs, there's about 6,500 quilt block patterns, but you have a search with keywords, and if you put in log cabin, 30 different patterns would come up. So that was really good for developing our themes with our quilts, Mary.
So then the whole quilting process started. The quilters stepped in, put quilt packages, blocks together. The quilt was stitched, and then once the quilt was finished, then the whole painting process started, and that was another whole feature. So there was planning, quilting, painting, and then a smaller team got involved and the quilt blocks were installed. And then there's a siting process involved. So it is quite a big project, but there's a beginning to it and there's an end to it. It's very rewarding and a lot of fun.
Well, I know that one of the other things, and this seems to be a rural theme. In the rural communities, when we are celebrating a bicentennial or something specific about our community, the ladies get together and they make a quilt. And it's all about that sense of community and the women getting together and getting the ball rolling on doing the fabric quilts. And it's actually a very time-honored process for quilt meetings, quilt gatherings, and it's just a very rewarding for honoring the domestic skills of the women.
But not necessary. No. The quilt is not absolutely necessary for doing a barn quilt project. You can just paint the quilts.
No, anybody can do a barn quilt block. What you're doing is doing a geometric image, and you don't have to have a quilt to go with it, and you don't have to have history. You just have to have inspiration for whatever property that you have or something with your property. So all you need to do is be inspired. I always tell this story. I'm not allowed to paint in the house because I'm too messy, but I can sure paint a barn quilt, and I know that you can too.
The key to the success was just the will and making people comfortable with the whole idea. When you talk to them about history, they're going, well, I'm not a historian, I don't know the facts. How could I possibly be involved, and where would we go to get that information? Well, I think part of the coordinator's job is to say, you know what, we do know a lot, and you know a lot as a quilter, you know a lot through your family history about the culture, about what it must have been like back then, and we just really had to set that tone of, you've got everything to offer to this project, because there's some trepidation behind it, because how do you get, first of all, you have to be a great artist, obviously, to get these things on a huge barn quilt on a piece of wood, and everybody was, well, I'm not an artist. Well, you don't have to be, because we've got artists that will do the sketching. We need your help is to really just kind of paint it in. And so it's really about talking and really finding a place for everybody in the project, and there is a place for everybody in these projects.
I own a quilt store in Mount Bridges, and I helped with getting the fabric, getting the blocks made, and putting it together. I love quilting and I love quilt blocks, and I saw a lot of quilts and barn quilts in the States, and I always thought it would be great if it came to Canada. So when I heard about this, I thought this is